Okay. So let's talk about ketamine for a second,
Hmm.
because there is a fairly robust practice and tradition of using ketamine to treat depression, PTSD, perhaps especially depression, substance use disorders as well. And it's this tradition I'm referring to is like a very medical model where the psychedelic experiences that sometimes come up with ketamine are seen as like this unwanted side effect, and just sort of I'll ask patients to sort of ignore that because it's just
Hmm.
this weird side effect. And it's not what we're interested in. Is the neuroplasticity that ketamine can induce that has this beneficial effect on your emotional parts of the brain, and have a powerful antidepressant effects.
Hmm.
And it's like happening, I don't know if it's at a cellular level or the level of certain networks or whatever. And
Yep.
um, is it not possible that we can create things like neuroplasticity and broader connectivity in the brain without needing these big, weird, intense experiences with lots of insight and all the meaning making that comes with it? Why do we need, what's the point of all this experiential stuff? Can't we just tweak some knobs in the brain and people get on with their lives?
Yeah, multiple perspectives here. So that is the biological reductionism model, trying to explain, the rapid antidepressant effects of ketamine based on a very mechanistic understanding of what it's doing on a cellular biological level. And it's valid. All of those things are valid explanations, but I think that they are only one like slice of the broader understanding of what's possible that just isn't accessible to the lens of biological reductionism. That lens needs to expand. Reference paradigm shift we talked about earlier. Um, so yeah, when people get a ketamine infusion, on average, 70% of people have quite a powerful reduction in their depressive symptomatology that lasts for about 7 days, and then it comes back, and then they have another infusion and another infusion. And from the lens of neuroplasticity, it's great, like make the brain more plastic. And yet, what are the conditions then that you're in with that enhanced plasticity? What is influencing your learning? What is there to help potentially challenge old ways of perceiving and reinforce ones that might be more beneficial to your long-term well-being? And this is where, it's hypothesized that when we add psychotherapy, when we add a rich context to those powerful biological effects, that we might actually see longer benefit, um, because it's really about enhancing learning. And it's fascinating to me. There is sort of this sprint happening to
Hmm.
find
Hmm.
psychedelics that
Yeah.
you take a
Yeah.
it'll have the same effect in the brain but take away all these pesky psychedelic side effects. But there's already published literature that meta-analyses that show that the intensity of the actual psychedelic experience, that mystical states of consciousness, unitive experiences, all of this, the intensity of that is predictive of positive outcome. And what primes a person to have a mystical experience, for example? Well, there's research on that too. And we're learning that having a state of openness and trust going into the experience will influence that, the ability to surrender. And some of those are personality traits, like trait openness, for example. So maybe someone with higher trait openness is going to have more likely to have a mystical experience. Yet psychedelics actually show that they can shift personality constructs. People who have psychedelic experiences we see have enduring increases in trait openness after the experiences. So, but we can, through preparation and what we do skillfully to help people learn, like, well, how do I surrender? You know, and that might look like in preparation, going, difficult experiences might come up. I'll be right here with you. it's can be really helpful to turn towards it, see it as a door to go through. Use your diaphragmatic breathing that we've taught if it's bringing up a lot of intensity, and that all of these things to help people kind of have some tools or some awareness ahead of time to then enter in and with surrender, with openness, and yeah, and then that really leading to the propensity to have these, I guess we would say, more positive and less challenging psychedelic experiences, which with both, there's still positive outcome, but there's more when people really do go to those kind of deep mystical states, which also depends on dose too. So I really think that, well, even with ketamine, actually, there's been research also that's shown that the effectiveness of ketamine for depression is increased by the depth of the trance-like psychedelic state that a person has. So this whole thing about it being a pesky side effect is just, I think it's not really informed at this stage, but it's a hangover of just this dominant way of sort of understanding and seeing how we think drugs work and what side effects are. And I think an overall overarching fear of that is natural, right? There's the fear of death and there's the fear of losing your mind, right? And we are very naturally more comfortable in our ordinary state of consciousness. Non-ordinary states of consciousness represent the unknown. So does death and also going crazy. Those are like the two fundamental fears. So it's natural, I think, for there to be some like pushback against things that put us into states that are not our status quo as an individual. And then, on a collective level, kind of what it ends up looking like is, not wanting to go to Vietnam and, protesting wars, and, the overarching collective status quo ends up getting questioned when we start expanding beyond the status quo of how we're perceiving and thinking. So I don't think, I'll be interested to see where the research goes, if compounds can be made that have like similar neurobiological effects, but nix out all of the meaning making psychedelic stuff. My hypothesis is not really going to go that far, or the potential will not be as great, but it remains to be seen.
Right. So I guess you're not going to invest in any companies that are doing drug discovery for this sort of thing.
It's interesting because the number of drugs that actually make it all the way through phase 3 and approval is minuscule. It's like probably 1% or less than 1%. So there's all this drug discovery going on right now, but really, like, when you look at the stats, how likely is it that any of these are going to really be successful? And we've got drugs that have been used for decades, if not, well, when you're talking about psilocybin, time immemorial, right? Acknowledging indigenous use through ceremony as a sacrament for healing, divination, in very carefully constructed settings, and in that enriching culture and being something very positive and revered in societies, in traditional societies that have incorporated psychedelics in their culture. So yeah, I think we've got LSD. I mean, it would be nice if LSD was not 10 hours, 12 hours long. If somebody could cut that in half, that would probably be beneficial. Though, with psilocybin, 6 to 8 hours, I think that it actually, there's companies that are trying to make a psilocybin that is actually like 2 to 3 hours in duration of effect. Or even if they tried to do that with MDMA, for example, to like shorten the effect. My perception is actually that the depth of healing that happens over an 8-hour session all day in the context of 2 therapists with a client is so profound. And it actually, I think, will lead to inefficiencies if you shorten it to like 3-hour sessions, but then have to have more of them. So again, it remains to be seen, but it's all fascinating to me.
Hey, thanks for checking out that clip of the Mindspace podcast. You can get the full episode here on YouTube or check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, and be well.